And I'm going to record to my, you're the best. Um, I always start when we go into a lecture, but all this stuff is such good information, right? So, but it's a way that you can be non-discreet with a chef or with the staff, and they don't have to, you know what I mean? You don't have to be that person in the crowd that has to be like, "Hey, I don't have it."
Hmm.
So I'll share that card with you guys, and it's something super easy that you guys can have and utilize if you choose, if you choose when you go out, because it makes it nice. And
Hmm.
I don't know, it just makes it a little bit nicer. So grateful that you're here. Grateful
Thank
for
you.
another round. I know.
Yes, I'm
So
excited.
excited. And then Sheila and Christine are here, the double duo.
It was a good week. I don't have a problem with getting the oils in, and I have my carbs low. What I didn't, I wasn't consistent in tracking. So I do use my measuring spoon, so I do know how many oils, but as far as my carbs, I just know they're low because
Right.
I don't eat carbs. So, but I don't know the actual number, and I think that I will commit this week to do the
Oh,
actual tracking.
it,
So
it
that's
could be fun.
important.
Again, it's literally just this like 0 point where you can like come back to, right? Like you could just stay and you go, okay, I get that. Okay, I see how much that is. Because
Mhm.
I definitely will always like I will say that there's something way more or way less of something, and I'm like, oh, I gotta check my barometer.
Yeah, and
It's
it's
not
yeah,
where
it's
it
not just
was.
yeah, so it's not just the tracking, it's the weighing and measuring because certainly, I mean, it's really hard to figure out how many macros a piece of meat is and whatnot unless you actually weigh it to know. So,
Yeah, and where I think that that gets like more particular, right, is when, let's just say, if someone is not in ketosis and
right.
we're looking at, is there a little bit too much protein?
Yeah.
The other would be if I think someone is under doing protein. So if they're not losing, if this is our goal, or gaining muscle mass, that would be the other part of this, and we think that there's too minimal amount of protein going on, where we would want to know, like, okay, we really need you to realize how many ounces this is, so that we can know, we can always use the palm, right? Like that's always a great device, but sometimes, like thickness and caliber and all that kind of stuff matters, and then we get it on there, we're like, oh, that's 5 times what I thought it was, or that's way less. So
Yeah.
that can be really helpful when we're just trying to create that stability. Because I don't, and I don't want everybody to have to weigh and measure all the time. It's really, again, this calibration, right? So this is a set point, and then we get to be able to live. It's not, you don't have to like live around a scale. It's just trying to get a calibration, right? So beautiful. And you're going to recalibrate.
That's right. Good word.
I love it. How was your week?
I didn't have a very good week. I'm starting to track again today. I don't typically eat tons of carbs. Um, so I'm pretty confident that this week will um, be easy to just kind of get back on track with tracking everything. I enjoy adding the oils back. So today, just kind of being day one, I just did one of each, just because I've been overindulging on a lot of foods. So yeah, I need this to try to just get back on track. So
No, and that's why you have all your accountability buddies here. Is just getting back on track, getting a plan, and it's really helpful to have everybody here. And the oils start to feel nice as you start to add them back in. If you've taken them away for a while, it really does feel very calming to the system. And as you start to feel satiated, you're like, okay, kind of like you breathe into it. It feels really nice. So I'm glad that you're doing that. Beautiful. And then I don't know whose iPhone this is. My secret admirer, iPhone 141. And it may be Andrea, but I don't know. And it's okay if she can't come off mute. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to go into lecture. If you guys, again, have any questions, I want you to just interrupt me in between. And if you've watched the week 2 prior tonight, if you have any questions before I start, go right ahead. If you don't, if you have questions while I'm talking, please interrupt me. That is a-okay. Sound good? Okay. And then, beautiful. Okay. All right. Ooh. All right. So we talked about our wins this week. And I hope everybody wrote their purpose statement. I had somebody share with me their purpose statement this week, and it was really great. So I hope that you guys have created some type of purpose statement of why we're doing what we're doing so that we can keep that in our forefront as things can get tough. And really keep the eye on the prize of like what we're really looking out for. And if you want to share with it, I would love to hear it. If you want to share with the group, you're totally open to sharing as well. So this goals and intentions, and some of you guys have a partner with you, so you can share your goal with them. And if you want to share it with me via my email, you totally can share. I always love it. And if you want to share it on the Facebook group, that's even more awesome. I will say sharing your goals, intentions, and your why statement can be really empowering because it's not like it's not your small secret, right? Like you're voicing it and you're saying, this is what I want to achieve. And this group is going to want to hold you accountable to that. So it can make it more real for you if you're feeling like you might not hold up to your accountability of yourself. So I just encourage you. So, okay, the 222, we've just talked about this, about our rule here, and this will continue throughout the program. And some of us are just getting adjusted to this 222 rule. And sometimes we start off slow. And again, this can be alterated for tolerability. So I have changed this for certain people where we've done like a 1-1-1, and that was better for their kind of makeup and what their body could handle. So again, we can kind of change this a little bit, but this is going to remain true throughout this whole course, just to keep us in that satiated zone, making sure that we have enough good fats, and then prioritizing protein as we go. So this will not change. And if any of you had any kind of dizziness this week, we always want to come back to that salt, because the salt is the one thing that's usually missing. Some of you have done probably really good with your salt, but again, if you feel that kind of weakness or dizziness, always check in with salt first. So this is where we get to have the magic start to begin. I'm very excited. We start to get into this rhythm, and we're going to be having less of those blood sugar spikes and falls, and we're going to get less of this hangry, or we call it like hypoglycemia. That's another word for it. So that starts to dissipate, and we really get to feel like we're starting to get control over when we eat, how much we eat, and lessening the power of where the hungry takes over the brain. So I never want you to eat less. I'm just telling you to eat less often. And that is about how many times a day we eat. So most Americans really keep within this kind of constant feeding state. I know most of us have been in a work environment where there is some type of candy, potato chip, brownie, pizza around like every single corner. And it's every 2 hours a day. If you walked around your office, you could find something to snack on. And when we're in boredom or even just out of habit, where let's just say when I work on a specific task, I have these nuts and these pretzels, and we condition ourselves that we always have to have them there. Like we feel weird if they're not. And so we're starting to change those types of behaviors into moving towards like 2 meals, no snacks, or 3 meals, no snacks. So we're going to start working towards that. But every time we eat, if you grab a nut or a potato chip or some kombucha or anything, every time you get a glucose spike. So your body believes that it's eating every single time. And most Americans do this 17 times a day. So there's absolutely a chronic kind of feeding state where we're going to work on having less of that to calm down these kind of discussions that are going on in our head. So anything that stimulates glucose is going to be considered um, a feeding state. And coffee, we're going to talk about coffee this week. So coffee can raise cortisol in certain individuals, and that's really dependent on your adrenals and how your adrenals are functioning. Some coffee is okay, and others it will raise a cortisol, which will give you a sugar spike, like when you worked out. So that will be dependent on if I tell you it can be in your fasted state or not. So we'll talk about that. So people who eat less often live longer. So when we look back at ancient cultures, people ate less often, right? They had to hunt their meals, and when they didn't find any meat, they were fasted, right? So it was a feast famine variation. So when they ate well. And then if there was nothing, they were scavenging and looking and hunting and moving, right? So they were utilizing what they had already consumed. So I don't want you to think about eating less as pushing, your meat, like half of your meal to one side of the plate, because this has actually been disproven over time. And we really get into when we think about calorie deprivation, the body, what it does is it starts to store for winter. Let's see. Um, it starts to believe that okay, let's just do it like this. So think about if you were in a wood cabin, and we're just going to picture us in Alaska. That's a great place, right? We all picture the cold. So every winter it lasts for 4 months, and you chop all your wood for 4 months. So you're putting your wood on the fire, putting wood on the fire as you typically would do. But then you're getting towards the end of the 4 months and you're starting to realize that winter is not breaking at all, and you're starting to get less and less wood. So then you put a little less on the fire, a little less on the fire, right? Your body starts to burn less when it believes that less is coming in. So we want it to we want it to be fueled at full steam and believe that when it's going to eat, it's going to cook at full gas, and then we're going to have a reprieve and it can still smolder, and then it can cook at full gas versus just these microcurrents that are coming in. So basal metabolic rate. Any of you come in and done an in-body scale, we can tell your in-body or your metabolic rate or a PNOE. And what it tells us is what your body will burn if you say Netflixed all day. So if you were at a very basal state, you weren't doing much, you could have this many calories and you would neither gain nor lose. So that is what's called basal metabolic rate. So every time you reduce calories, your metabolism starts to slow. And at first, this is going to work for weight loss, but then it starts to go into survival mode. And we go back to that story of being in the cabin with not enough wood. So now you could go down to 500 calories a day and still never lose because it's got to save for winter, right? And your biggest fuel source is your fat. You got to hold on to it. So this is why this caloric restriction doesn't work over time, is because the body starts to learn to burn at a lower and lower rate. It can work for short periods of time, but it's not going to for long durations. And it's definitely not going to work through the hormonal chaos of perimenopause, menopause. I promise you that. Your hormones will not allow it. So hormones play a key role in weight loss and lasting energy. So we want to optimize them so they're talking better. And our bodies have an innate intelligence that they want to survive at all costs. And when they feel threatened, they want to marshal up and they want to surge things like adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine. Guess what? These are all related to cortisol. What happens when we spill cortisol? We spill sugar. And we spill sugar, we get cortisol belly weight. So if we're consistently threatened, we're going to minimize your sex hormones because it is save your life at all costs. Do not lay down to make babies. So we have to be able to get out of this threatened state, and not being able to, during these states when the body feels threatened and cortisol is elevated, we can't curb our carb cravings. That's fun to say. Curb our carb cravings, and stick to a healthy diet when we have these surges of adrenaline. So if we're not having a regular sleep schedule, if we're working really late hours, if we're working way too many days in a row and way too late, we are going to reach for things that are sweet and salty and are going to try to give us some type of comfort. But it's because cortisol is demanding it. So I will tell you that hormones can be all over the map, and it doesn't matter what age. And it's when I look at younger people and we start to see hormone deficits, what we're like, if someone's told that they're in a early perimenopause, or a male that is looking like he has low testosterone in his 30s, we have to look at why, because there's no reason, you're not just getting older, of why they should be low. So these are my hormones. Look at this estrogen. Isn't that beautiful? That's like, we're looking at like a 80, 90-year-old woman here, right? Like it's like non-existent. Estriol, non-existent. Okay. So when we're looking at this, this is when I was at my sickest. Zero across the board, no estrogen, no progesterone, no testosterone. It was like minuscule. But it was because the body was under so much threat that it couldn't make sex hormone, right? Save your life at all costs. Don't lay down to make babies. So when we're looking at this, do we have some type of infection? Are we not sleeping? In men, this is the first thing I look at. Do we have sleep apnea? If we're not breathing at night, the body is having a cortisol response saying, oh my gosh, save his life, he has no oxygen, right? So we always want to be looking at, if we have hormones that are disturbed during this process and they're way too low at a way too young of an age, or it looks outside of what it should be, why? What is the why that's going on? So why the cell stops talking. And I like this schematic. So we've talked about in the cell membrane, if everybody was here for the cell membrane challenge, this is what's called the phospholipid bilayer. You can see my cursor here. So you have two layers, and these two bilayers are the protection for the cell. They allow things in and out, and they protect us from toxins coming in. So in the center, you have what's called your mitochondria, and that makes your wonderful ATP, which is your energy, which we all want more of, right? So outside the cell, you actually have 30,000 receptors. It's hard to believe that like 30,000 receptors go around all of your cells, right? So these receptor sites, what they're doing is, let's say hormones will attach. It can be micronutrients, neurotransmitters, they will attach. When they communicate with the phospholipid bilayer, they will enter, they will do their job, they will communicate, and they will leave with the proper organ they're supposed to. So there's a lot of work that's being done. So let's just say we have testosterone and it's supposed to attach to testosterone. So normally they attach, they go in, they do their job, they leave, and everybody's happy. But if we have cellular inflammation, which is like this little wall that goes all around the cell, this now, when your hormone receptor attaches, it cannot get in or possibly out of the cell. So it doesn't matter how much testosterone we put on the cell, if it can't get in and out, you're not going to feel like the master blaster at the gym. The other problem is, let's say that the hormone gets in or the neurotransmitter gets in, it does what it's supposed to do, but now it can't leave. So now we're starting to look more into this situation where it's kind of like you started a fire in the fireplace and you didn't open up the damper and now you have smoke. And when we have smoke, we affect the mitochondria, and the mitochondria can't make more ATP and can't do its job to communicate your cellular communication. So things that create the cellular inflammation, things like sugars, bad fats like canola oils, toxins from the environment, things like heavy metals, molds, plastics, phthalates, all those wonderful things. Those are big reasons what caused this cellular inflammation. So optimizing hormones, ancient cultures have taught us that eating less often raises growth hormone, which makes our cells and our hormones talk better. So they optimize our hormones. All of us want more growth hormone. If we're all over the age of 30, which I think most of us are here, we want more growth hormone because that's when it starts to lower. Our skin tends to not be as elastic as it was. We're not recovering as quickly. We don't have that same get up and go. And that's because growth hormone is starting to leave and we want as much of it as we can. And when we fast 14 to 16 hours, we actually get this big increase in growth hormone. So we want more of that. Hormone change in order to improve our longevity. So ways that we can optimize, these are outside of like feast famine variation. So other things like exercise, hyperbaric chambers, hot cold therapy. So when we do a small stress with extreme hot or small stress with extreme cold, we stress the cell to create good change and also enhance growth hormone during those. We can force adaptation. So this rule, new rules that we're going to adapt this week, we're going to only consume 3 meals. And some of you, this is something that you already do. And some of you, this is going to be a new hard thing. And we're going to go 3 meals, 0 snacking. And if you're already doing like 3 meals, no snacking, we can start working towards 2. I typically do that towards next week. But if you're someone that's already there, we're going to move to 2 meals, no snacking. And some of you may consider that you're not quite snacking if you drink something that has a little bit of sugar in it or something like that. We want to keep, if you're going to have anything that increases glucose or lowers your ketones as part of like what's called a meal. And so keeping that within your meal time. So water outside of those meals, that's it. We're going to try lowering your carbohydrates from half your body weight. So let's just say last week you were at 150, I'm going to take you to 75, or let's say you were at 100, I'm going to take you to 50. Now, when we're under 50 grams of carbohydrates, we're playing around, say, 20 or 30. That if you're not at 50 already, let's just get you to 50, and then we can play with the zone below that in the next week. I just don't, again, as we drop them rather rapidly, we can start to have symptoms, whether it be brain fog, you're starting to feel light or weak-headed. That will be more difficult the lower carbohydrates we have. So I don't like to do this too abruptly, but again, if you're already at 100, let's take you to 50. And if you're, say, at 75, let's have it. Let's play. Let's see how your body feels. And we're going to continue with the 2-2-2 rule. So,
Maria, I have a
yes.
quick question. Does black coffee count as,
Good question. We're going to talk about that.
okay, sorry.
Absolutely. No. It was a great question. You were perceiving what was going to happen.
Okay.
No, it was perfect. Okay. So, mitochondrial adaptation, the mitochondria are the brains of the cell. This is where the ATP produces, and they're very sensitive to environmental stress. And stresses change the integrity and the function, such as like medications or toxins. These can be environmental stresses on the mitochondria. Stresses to the mitochondria cause major consequences on its performance and function. And strategies have shown that mitochondrial dysfunction is a major cause of injury to during like pathological conditions. So let's just say you had COVID. We can have major issues with your mitochondria, environmental insults, whether it be like loss of blood flow or extreme if you had hypothermia or exposures to toxins, let's just say mold or massive, like if you were in Flint, Michigan and there was lead, these can all disturb how the mitochondria functions. But what I was going to mention before, small stresses on the mitochondria over time make it healthier. And when we create a small stress, so if I were to tell you to go to the gym and go bicep curl 65 pounds, most of you, and that's with a single arm, most of you would be like, oh no. But some of you could be like, oh yeah, I could do it, right? And you grab it. The next day, you may have torn your bicep, or you may not be able to lift with that arm for a few days, or you might have given yourself some type of elbow tendonitis. So those are diminishing returns. But if I went and told you to go lift a 15-pound weight and do it 15 times and then do that every day, you're going to get stronger each time you do it. It's going to get easier and easier and easier. So these small stresses on the mitochondria make it stronger. And that's the idea with intermittent fasting and working towards longer fasts, is that we're creating these small stressors over time that create stronger cells. So during this week, you're going to start to see increased ketone productions. You're going to get more accustomed to being a fat burner versus a sugar burner. And if you're not quite there yet, you might start to feel that still a little bit of that headache, a little bit of that dizziness, maybe irritability, because you're getting like those 3 meals, no snacks, or 2 meals, no snacks. So as you start to get away from that, you might feel that. And if you do, think about how much good fat did I have and how much protein did I have? Could I do better at my next meal so I don't have those same kind of symptoms in between? And then this is going to start creating that metabolic mitochondrial fitness. So we talked about lifting that weight. We're creating that small stress on the mitochondria to make it fitter over time so that it can go out without foods, and it's causing it to upregulate fats for fuel to help use it. That's where we just like look down at our booty and go, oh yeah, we've got a lot to use there, right? So cutting back on the meal increases our stem cells, and the body begins to eat bad tissue because bad cannot survive. The weak cannot survive, only the strong. So every time we stress, only the strong survive. And then as we start to create new cells under those very healthy cells, those strong cells, we get better and better, right? So it can hurt in the beginning. It won't, I promise, at the end. This week we'll start to shift through that. So just keep rolling. It's gonna be okay. Um, less meals, less meals and snacking equals more autophagy. So remember, we talked about the giant Pac-Man that eats the bad cellular debris. So your body will start to eat the bad tissues, these weak cells, and these stem cells will start to proliferate and they will replace these bad cells. Older white cells will start to drop out, and white cells are on our line of inflammatory cells, these hypersensitive cells that will go and drive inflammation, these will actually start to die off. So again, back to the whole like your rings fit better, everything's starting to feel like it's looser and we don't feel as creaky. Those are the old white cells dropping out. And now new immune cells that are less reactive can actually start proliferating and then making you feel better as well as live longer as we get more telomeres. Remember the little ends of the shoestrings with the little plastic ends? We're going to make those longer. So we're going to be healthier longer. So our grocery list, this is just kind of a basic, you guys have this in your booklet and it's just kind of a basic, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Again, if you're only doing 3 meals, no snacks, let's try to work towards 2 meals. But if you have not capitalized on the 3 meals, no snacks, I really implore you to stay within this zone this week. If you feel like maybe you're grabbing, drinks and things in between that might not quite keep you in that fasted state. And that kind of goes through. Okay, let me talk about your coffee. So coffee is an interesting one. And for many of us, coffee is not a problem, especially if it's black. But coffee does have caffeine and it can raise cortisol. So some of us that are more cortisol sensitive, it could raise it and raise your glucose and drop your ketones. So what I like you to do, and this is a test that you all can do, is check your glucose and your ketones before you drink your coffee. Then 30 minutes after you have your coffee, take it again. If you have the exact same glucose and ketones, no response. Or if your glucose drops and ketones rise, no response. That's a good thing. But if glucose rises and ketones lower, then you have a response. And I've been on both sides of this coin. So I've had a point in time where I had zero responsiveness to coffee. And then I had a point where I've had cortisol surges where I've had responses from coffee. So this is very individualized. I will tell you that most people, if you use some type of heavy cream or MCT oil in your coffee, you will typically see an increase in ketones and a drop of glucose happen with your coffee. So play with it, and I'll be interested to hear what everybody has to say next week about their coffee. And if you're not a coffee drinker, then you won't have to have, it's not a problem for you. But for those of us that are coffee drinkers, it is absolutely okay as long as it does not raise your glucose or lower your ketones. So
So
go ahead.
quick, totally addicted to 1.5 cups of coffee in the morning. But I have found different coffees create different stimulus in me. And I have found some like the no mold coffees or organic coffees cause less of the buzz.
Yep.
That's without measuring anything, but wondered about that.
Yeah, so that would be actually fun for you. Like you could test with those different types of coffees and see if you get a response from some certain coffees versus another. Again, right, low mo coffees and organic coffees are going to have less toxins that are involved. And then also Some coffees, the caffeine count is way higher than other coffee. So
Mhm.
that can absolutely, like a typical Starbucks coffee has about 240 milligrams, which are classic was what we know when we grew up. Coffees really only had about 80 milligrams, and now a classic coffee has like 240 milligrams of caffeine. So the playing field with the coffees that we work with today are very different, and I would explore, and it's like how many beans were used to make the roast and how dark did you want to seep the right. So I think that really is dependent, and I think you could play with it with your monitor and see again if we're getting that glucose to raise or lower or ketones to raise or lower. So again, we want to see ketones rise and glucose lower.
Okay, good. Well, I'll share that because for any coffee drinkers, I've done some exploration. So, um, healthy coffee is better.
Beautiful. Yes. Okay. All right. So this is something I want you guys to prepare for next week. And I want you to think about and write down this week when you had your first bite of food and when you had your last bite of food. And this is literally like, let's say you had dinner at 5:30, but then at 7:30 you decided to grab some nuts. So your last bite of food would be that 7:30 if you grab those nuts, right? So I want you to know the first time and the last time you had anything to consume. And that is just going to help us build onto your personal window as we go into next week. So I'm not giving you any hard start or stop times. We're going to work that next week. Again, I'd love to keep you 3 meals, no snacks. And again, if we start to feel hungry before the time that we kind of plan to eat, did we have enough protein? Did we have enough good fats? Did we cover our 222? And if we didn't, we want to think about, okay, next time I'm going to get more of my 222 in earlier in the day because that helps me towards the end of the day. So start to kind of play with that a little bit as you go throughout your day. And then when you're done in the evening, you're going to be done. And I want you guys to write those times down just so I can start to get a feel for where we're at for start and stop times. And then we're going to talk about personalized feeding windows next week. And anybody that has like glucose or ketone readings, you can always keep those during these, and then we can talk about them next week, and I can help you guys personalize that feeding window as we start to go in for next week. And if you don't have a Keto Mojo, that's okay. We will personalize it regardless, given our information that we have, and kind of keep you in a structured way. So it's not about eating less; it's about eating less often. Oh, this was a fun thing that I had with the interconnected course, and it talks about environmental toxicity and places we can find it. And this is just a gift if you guys want to go onto the series, and I can add it into the Facebook group and you guys can just log in and watch it. I think they have like 8 videos where they did like a docu-series and it was really educational. So, okay. So questions.
Oh,
Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
Um, I use heavy cream in my coffee. Lisa wanted to know if butter in her coffee.
Yeah, let's talk about bulletproof coffee. Okay.
That's what I
So
use.
yeah, butter, if none of you have ever tried butter in your coffee, it is delicious. And I either use butter, MCT oil, and then heavy cream. Um, and I can show you guys a little recipe. So it's best if you kind of like whip it with a frother, but it becomes really creamy, frothy. It's super yummy. I usually typically use salted butter with it, but it is wonderful and it can really maintain a fast for a very long time. So, and it's a way to use like your 222 is use your coffee, but it is the first time I heard about bulletproof, I was like, oh, that just sounds disgusting of butter in my coffee. It is fantastic. So,
Okay.
So is
but
coconut oil.
yeah, coconut oil, MCT oil, very, very good. I'll always, and then I also will use, I'll share this with you guys, but LMNT, they have electrolytes, but they have a chocolate and they also have now they had a winter pack with chai chocolate and then they had raspberry chocolate and mint chocolate and the mint chocolate is my absolute favorite, although I do like the chai with cinnamon. Um, but I'll put like eighth of a packet in with my coffee with that, and it's phenomenal. Way better than any type of frappuccino you could ever have in your life. It's the best.
Oh, yeah.
What's it called again?
It's LMNT. I'll put this in the chat here. It's LMNT.
Element. It's delicious.
Yeah, and you can get this off of Amazon. Yeah. And the chocolate like winter pack was what I was the most recent one. They had the chocolate one in the regular pack, but then they had a winter pack with chocolate mint.
Oh yeah,
Phenomenal.
the chocolate mint was good. I like mango chili is my favorite.
Mango chili is my favorite if I'm doing regular. Yeah, they have all kinds of really good flavors, but that's great for coffee.
Mhm.
So,
I have a question, Maria, because
yeah.
the people keep changing theories on this. So when you say butter and coffee and MCT oil and coffee, does that count as your eating window? I can speak.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So typically anything that breaks the fast is really something that breaks what your glucose and your ketones. So if your ketones continue to rise and your glucose continues to drop, it doesn't really break a fasted window. So there are elitists in the world when you there's elitists in anything that you do. Just let's just claim that, right? So there are people that, you're strict you're dry fasters and water fasters and stuff, and it's anything besides water, then it's broken. But when we look at how the body responds, when you look at Walter Longo's work, this is where it really kind of hits home. So he really coined the term autophagy.
Mm.
And when when the body is over 15 grams of protein and under 700 calories, the body believes it's fasted. So if you put butter or heavy cream in your coffee, you have not broken your caloric intake and you have not broken your protein intake. And if glucose does not rise and ketones continue to rise, your body believes it's still fasted. So you have to kind of stay within that scientific realm. It still believes it's fasted. If you wanted to only give yourself water, like, you know what I mean? Like, and we're like, I really strictly only want to give myself water for the set a period of time, you could set that for yourself. But when you look at physiologically what your body is doing, it doesn't believe it believes it's still fasted. It still creates the autophagy if you're under 15 grams of protein. So I think we have to rely on how the body's cells respond in that case. Yep.
Question, Maria, under
Yeah.
15 grams of protein, but that also then is like 0 grams carbs.
Um, well, under 700 calories. So like you could have a higher carb count. Like, so let's just say the body would believe it was fasted if you had, let's say you had a quarter cup of beans and that's like what you had for a whole day, the body would still believe it was fasted. Because again, like it didn't cross a protein count and it didn't cross a calorie count. So it stayed within that fasted state. Granted, you would get a little bit of a carb spike from that quarter can of beans, but you never pass those thresholds. right?
So,
So,
okay.
so when you look at a fasting mimicking diet, so this is what kind of Walter had created, which was called fasting mimicking. It
Stop.
is slightly higher carbohydrate food where, so he'll, like minestrone vegetable soup. So you don't have much protein, you have some little veggies in there, you maybe get like 20 carbs there, and then you do, a little it has like a little bar and then teas, but throughout the day you never get above 15 grams of protein, you never get above 70 calories, but maybe you had 48 carbs. So your ketones may not be as high if when we're looking more, and I'll come back to this idea as well. um, your your carbohydrates are going to be in there, but overall, if you did that multiple days in a row, you still have dug from your bank because your body takes much more of that to preserve. So that small amount of carbs is really not going to do much over time to keep it out of ketosis. It's going to be in ketosis. But when we look at like what's called um, your like maximum ketone ratio, so we're like what's called GKI, we there's this perfect ratio. It's like a 4-to-1 ratio where we're looking at GKI where you can get maximum ketone benefit, which we all would love, right? So um, if you had less carbohydrate in that fasted window, you would have more maximum GKI. So you get more stem cell production, but doesn't mean you're still not fast. Like you're still fasted either way. You're still getting stem cell production. It's just one way you're going to get slightly more than another. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Now I have another question for you. To gag down those oils,
Uh-huh.
that's not a clinical way to put it, but the 2, 2, and 2 weighs out to about 2¼ ounces.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did then was I made chia pudding and hemp seed together. My kids got me a thing called a Ninja Creamy. So then I froze it all together and then made it into ice cream. And I'm gonna try this LMNT thing because I need better flavoring in it. But it
Oh,
does make it easier to gag down, I mean, sorry, to ingest the 2, 2, 2.
enjoy. Yes. No, there you can actually make like an avocado ice cream, but and you can put like cacao powder in it and yeah, but the Ninja Creamy. So I'll tell you guys, this is not in my kitchen utensils because when I made that video, the Ninja Creamy was not out. But this is an incredible tool and it's just for fun. But it makes anything you like, you can turn anything like into ice cream and freeze it and make it this really thick texture. So if you're missing texture in that sense, the Ninja Creamy is a really cool thing that you guys can utilize. So I love that you have it. And then we can play with some flavors with the LMNT because I'm excited to see what you come up with because I need a recipe now.
Dang it, this thing's expensive. Why you gotta say that?
I know.
I don't even know what they paid for it. They gave it to me for Christmas.
Yeah, it's a thing.
How
Yeah,
much is it?
oh, it's a massive thing. I haven't actually bought one, but it is a massive thing, and I have like heard rave reviews from everyone I know that uses it. And but yeah, you can make all kinds of really fun stuff with it. But
Yeah,
I
there's
know.
different tiers, but it's like $200 ish.
Yeah.
It's basically like if you've ever been around a drilling rig, it has this container of whatever you have frozen, and literally it goes down like a drilling rig and comes back up as if you were digging a well.
Uh-huh. Oh,
And
funny.
and they give you some rules so you don't break it. But it's pretty amazing.
I
You
love
wouldn't stick your fingers in it.
I'll break it. I would be like the first one. I wouldn't read the rules, and I would just be like, "Mom."
Right. That'd be me. Dang it, I love
So,
ice cream.
Maria, I have a quick question. I
Yes.
think it's quick, maybe not. The difference between getting into ketosis and then the stimulus of the fast.
Ooh. Okay.
One and the same, but yet they're separate. And it seems like ketosis loses some of its importance when we go into the fast, but I'm confused about the chemistry of it all, I guess.
Yes, beautiful. Okay, so 0.5 ketones lets us know that we're starting to go into ketosis. So that's just telling us that your body is starting to upregulate fatty acids for fuel. So then and we like to see that process start to happen. And when we look at our lengths, and this has been studied at length, so when we're looking at like 14 to 16 hours, we see this upregulation of growth hormone. So if someone is using fasting really to build muscle mass, and many of us have different goals with our fast, and we can have multiple goals. It can be, muscle mass, fat loss, autoimmune, like it can be a lot of things, right? So depending on the length of our fast, depends on what we're trying to upregulate. So during that duration, we want to see that ketones are elevating throughout that. And then as we get longer into the fast, what we're looking at is what's called max GKI, which we'll talk about more in the next couple of weeks. But that's just glucose to ketone ratio. And that just tells us how many stem cells are we creating to help us with that cell autophagy. And that really affects us more as we're looking at autoimmunity, as we're looking for bad cell turnover debris, where we want more of that max GKI. If someone was specifically fixated on muscle mass, we want to see those ketones elevate, those glucose drop, and we have a very regulated metabolism during that time. And we're going to kind of stick between our time frame, but we're not going to care so much about max GKI. But if you're someone, fat loss is a big thing, but also if we have autoimmunity, we want those longer fasts. So we're going to try to see where we can get to with that max GKI, the glucose to ketones ratio, just because we want the maximum cells, stem cells that we can create. And then that also is information, because if we cannot get higher ketones or lower glucose to a point like it's starting to be restricted, okay, that comes back and says, what kind of toxins do we have on board? What kind of support do we need to put in here so we can help assist the body in that process? Because if we're getting stuck, that tells us that we've got toxins on board. So so you were just putting that all together and you were trying to figure out how that loop went. So it was beautiful.
Well, it seems separate, but yeah. And so it seems like in the beginning, we're forcing this ketosis. We're forcing our body to change into ketosis, but now I'm not eating and I'm doing that by eating different things, fats and proteins. So I'm forcing it, but now all of a sudden I'm eating nothing. How does my body know to stay in ketosis?
The reason why you're not eating is because you've upregulated ketones.
Okay, so and it'll stay there.
Yes, and you're up. So if you think back to the first lecture, when I was talking about fuel sources, we were talking about glucose versus ketones. So when we upregulate glucose, we only have 36 ATP. When we upregulate ketones, we have 380 ATP. So guess what? How many fat cells do I have to burn?
Oh, you are eating. That was what I was like.
So the ketosis is starting the car. It's starting the engine, rum. And once it's going, it's just going to run on its own.
You're just eating this crap instead.
We just saw an aha moment. We just saw an aha moment in the making.
No, yeah, that I understand.
So that's why we have to put the two in. Is so we gotta get, like, I gotta get you to a point where we get that engine moving, right? So now the engine is moving, and now all of a sudden you're like, I don't even feel like I need to eat, right? So the clarity starts to come as, like, you don't even have to think about food, but it's because it's satiated because it's using ketones. If you weren't using ketones, you would still be angry and like as we call it, hypoglycemia. You'd be like, like it, right? But instead,
hypoglycemia.
Right, hypoglycemia is the best word. So, but instead, you're already like, "Ugh, I'm kind of satiated, like I don't even really need to eat." But that's only because your ketones are upregulated. If they weren't there, you wouldn't have that same response.
See, I
Right?
didn't realize they didn't continue to need stimulus. Once it realizes my body says no, burn fat instead of sugars and carbohydrates, it will stay there. Sorry, my light's
Yeah,
freaking out.
it'll stay there unless you like if you ate a bunch of carbohydrates, it
Okay.
would suppress the ketones. So
Which is I don't know why I'm getting a light show here. But one last question, and maybe this is for everybody. You keep often I get the sweet potatoes are cool, but in a last recipe you showed stuffed potatoes and also bananas. And I was so sad. I didn't know how I could go without coffee, bananas, or potatoes, but they seem to be okay.
did are in the video like are they using cauliflower? Are they typically are
Well, two slides back, whenever you were showing the recipes, it showed a stuffed potato.
oh, and but that's with cauliflower. Yeah.
It was on your slide, Maria.
I was like, yes.
Oh, I had a cauliflower stuffed pizza and
It was
It was a
potato.
stuffed potato.
oh,
You saw it too, huh?
oh,
Yeah, she reacted. So maybe you can go to Outback Steakhouse and have their baked potato.
Well, it kind of,
if you
so
if you
just,
go to
yeah.
if you go to the recipe for the baked potato, it's actually mashed cauliflower.
Oh, no.
Oh, wow, boo.
Uh, I'm with you, Lucy. That's not what her slide said, is
I
it?
know.
Butter and bacon.
But sweet potatoes are okay. Yes.
So sweet potato, and the thing is like when we get into, and this goes back to fun chips. Remember my thing about fun chips? Where do you want to spend your carbs at your fun chips?
Yeah.
So if you want to say, if you're having 50 carbs and you want to spend 30 of them on a fourth of a sweet potato or whatever it is, then absolutely go for it. When we get into feast famine variation, um, we will have higher carb days where you can put those foods in, and we'll do that on week 4. So we're going to talk about feast famine variation on week 4, but we can put some of those higher carb rich foods in. And but again, it's back to fun chips. Where do we want to spend them? So sweet potato is a really good thing for progesterone, and especially for women that are cycling. And when we're towards the back end of our cycle, orange and red foods, so sweet potatoes, peppers, strawberries, yams, like all of those things are really good for progesterone. So we want to put those foods in. So we're going to talk about those in the coming weeks. And you're sorry your loaded potato over there was cauliflower,
It's
but
okay.
sweet potato, again, measure and just see how much you have. And when we get towards the other side of this, guys, when you're fasting and say you're only doing 2 meals a day, I want you to have glycogen replacement, and putting in sweet potatoes and things like that will be fine. It's just getting us, we have to go through this process so that we can get to the point that we can have a fasted period and we can have a feasted period. And so when we're putting in carbohydrates and things, we're going to do them very systematically, and it's not going to feel as rigid. It just feels rigid right now and clunky, but
Gotcha.
you will not stay here for forever. I promise. You're going to be able to eat like a normal human, but you're not going to be the normal human that's grabbing all the stuff all the time. You're going to be like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm going to brunch. And guess what? I'm going to have dinner, and that's all I'm doing for the entire day. Or I'm just having brunch, and that's it. And that's okay. But guess what? You had a bunch of carbs at that brunch, but you're not eating the rest of the day, and you're not doing all the stuff in between. And we're
Oh, I
going to
love it.
serve our hormones in between. So this is just that clunky period. So it's all going to start to like make sense. But right now, it's beautiful that you're like, I don't even feel like I need to eat, because that's your ketones upregulated. So
Hey, Maria, quick question on that.
yeah.
Today, and it wasn't intentional, but I ended up with an eating window of about an hour. And I had 4 or 5 ounces of lamb. And then I had the Trader Joe's stuff, what's it called, paneer or something.
Mhm.
spinach and then that cheese, which netted out to about 11 grams carbs,
Okay.
and then the fats. But Lisa is questioning whether I'm getting enough protein.
You might be a little limited. So typically with men, I will tell you, so men can take about 60 grams of protein per meal, and women can only take about 40. It's just livers can't process that. Like livers are different, they don't process that much. So men can take about up to 60, but Rod, you're probably going to need at least a 180 to 100, I would say about at least 80, but 100 a day. So if we're, you know, when I do a men's ladder, and that's what we'll talk about, and if we're doing one meal, the one meal a day usually only lasts for say 3 days where you're doing one meal a day. Most days you're going to at least do two, and you're going to have, you're going to separate those by like say 50 grams and 50 grams versus just one meal. Because typically if that meal was only 40, you'd only be getting 40 for the whole day, and that's really not going to suffice your muscle.
Okay. Yeah, I had good intentions to eat again at about 3 or 3:30, and then a phone call came in, and
Yep.
by the time it was done, heck with it.
Yeah. So and that'll happen. And that's okay. Like you're gonna have and again, that could be a slight challenge for your body. It's a small stressor. But then the next day, I want you to make sure that you go in and get, 50 and 50. And if we need to use some amino acids or something to support your muscle, that's just the most important thing is we want to protect our muscle at all costs.
Yeah.
Is and when we do a longer fast, it's very deliberate. So if it's like a 3 day or a 5 day, it's very deliberate, but then we're going back to refeeding and we're making sure we're getting our protein. So during this process, you're just trying to figure out what are the ebbs and flows. Beautiful.
I have a question, going back to cycling. So I know there's kind of looking at Dr. Mindy's phases or whatever. So on this, I know you said like the latter half of the progesterone. So how I typically do it is there's two phases where I have higher carbs. So during this program, do you suggest just keeping it at the 20 to 30 carbs, or I don't know, what are your recommendations when I'm in that?
Yeah. So typically with cycles, so what I try to figure out is if there's anybody, um, we have our projected fast, which will be like, I think it's October 6th-esque. I don't have my phone right there. Um, I'll tell you the exact date, but it's week 6. If any woman was going to be the week before their cycle on that week, I would have us move it back a week for them, just so we're not disrupt it. It will be so much harder for you, because progesterone loves carbohydrates, and if progesterone is dropping, you're going to be very hangry. Once you have your bleed and you're starting to rise, you're going to have an easy fast. It will be absolutely easy on the body, and we can fast anywhere in between there. But that last week, I will tell you guys, let's just hold off for another week. It'll be easier on everybody. But yeah, the carb rich foods, which we tend to put in that last week before the cycle. And tomorrow I'll post and I'll send even a Kajabi out, of progesterone rich foods that we do towards that latter half of the cycle. During this course, I won't have you have that mid cycle boost that you've looked at. And just because it'll make it a little bit easier this first kind of round. It's okay during that middle time to have a little bit of carb, but we won't go in that in depth at the moment with the cycle.
Okay.
But we will at the end, and I'll tell you where, all that stuff is. Right now, I just want to get into a rhythm. But if you were towards the back end of the cycle, I would just have us do, say you're at 75 and you're having more of those orange and rich foods. We'll just get through that week and then we'll just go back in. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't recommend. I've done it. I didn't. At the beginning when we first did it, Maria, and one of my fasts was on my. It was the worst. It was don't do it.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Beautiful. Okay. So you guys are going to keep track of your start and your stop times. You're going to do your 2-2-2s. You're going to half your carbs of where you were unless you were already at 50, and check your ketones and your glucose. If you're at 50 and you're not in ketosis, then we will work on either lowering those carbohydrates or changing your protein intake. So keep track of those so that we can kind of dial that in, and then working towards those 3 meals, no snacks, or 2 meals, no snacks, depending on where you personally are at. Okay. Beautiful.
Good.
So excited. All right. And then, Rod, I'm going to expect some recipes from the Ninja Creamer.
I will go see what I can pull off.
Okay. And then I want like full videos of you like doing your creamer with the move and like showing us how thick and
Oh,
creamy it is.
oh, it lacks theater. You push the button.
Eh.
We need to see like how thick it is, and like, you know, like when Dairy Queen, if you, not that I've ever had a Dairy Queen, when you get Dairy Queen and then they like hold it upside down in front of you. I need to see this, Rod, with the Ninja Creamer.
Definitely recipes.
Yes. So
I'll
many
work on it.
Beautiful. All right. Okay. I will share this with, and I'm going to do this one to YouTube. So then, Sheila, it's easier to just press play. And then, yeah. So just the recording of this, you guys will have it. I'm going to put it through YouTube so you guys have a feed from YouTube versus the other one where you have to put in the little passcode. So, excellent. If you guys have any questions during the week, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or into the Kajabi portal or my email. And you guys are doing amazing already. I'm so excited. So I will see
Great
you
job.
Monday.
Thank you.
Guys,
Thank
take care.
you.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.